In case you missed it, and let's be honest, you probably did because nobody's been talking about it, July is Disability Pride Month. And so what I thought I would do to celebrate is do an updated version of my Sewing with a Disability video from 3 years ago. 3 years ago? Oh my god. But first, a little bit about Disability Pride, because it's a difficult thing for a lot of people to understand. Why would you be proud of something that is supposedly so bad and terrible? But the reality is a lot of disabled people don't think about their disability that way. Disability is completely neutral. What makes being disabled so difficult is the lack of access and other people's bigoted attitudes. Disabled people are often viewed as objects to be pitied or condescendingly tolerated. But disabled people are the world's largest majority. 20%, that's 1 in 5 people have a disability, and 80% of those disabilities are required. That means that you could become disabled at any point in your lifetime. And yet our community is still viewed with such disdain. And so Disability Pride is about celebrating all the wonderful things that come with being disabled and not accepting this tragic or inspirational narrative that is thrust on us by a society that frankly doesn't know what it's on about. Personally, I have a slightly different relationship with Disability Pride, because for me, even if the outside world became this accessible, accepting utopia, there would still be days where I just feel too ill to get out of bed. And that sucks, and I'm mad about it. But I'm not ashamed, and I'm at a point now where I won't let other people make me feel ashamed either. And I am proud of myself. Even if I woke up tomorrow miraculously cured, disability has informed who I am. It will always be a part of me, and I am proud of that. I'm proud of my perseverance, I'm proud of my adaptability, and I'm incredibly proud of the little community that we have built here. Existing as a disabled person publicly anywhere comes with its downsides, and I have absolutely experienced discrimination and ableism in the sewing, vintage, and historical costuming online communities. And as great as it is to lead from the front fighting discrimination, I'm tired. And sometimes it's just nice to come to this little corner of the internet where we support and inspire each other, where we don't have to explain ourselves, and we can be around people who understand. So yeah, I am proud to be disabled, and I'm proud of you too. So shall we talk about sewing? So what I thought we would do for this bit is, first of all, I'm going to go back and watch my own video and remind myself what we talked about, and then I'd sort of do like a review and update you on the points in that video to see if anything's changed. And then I'll talk about all the amazing tips and tricks that I've learned from you over the past few years, from the comments on that video, from conversations we've had on Instagram and in the comments, things like that. So here we go. Which leads me on to my first point, which is find what works for you. Find what works for you. I still wholeheartedly stand by that. And more importantly, I think it's good to remind our community generally about that, because still, despite being very publicly disabled on the internet, bloody hell, I'm even like the token disabled person for the historical costuming community. That's why I'm in Bernadette's book, for goodness sake. See, look, there I am. Despite that, I still get loads of comments still on my videos whenever I do something a little bit different, which is like, oh my god, you're doing it wrong. Google how to put in a zip. First of all, I don't know why people sort of assume if you share your sewing journey online that you must be like a home-taught sewer, a self-taught sewer. And I am not a self-taught sewer. So if I'm doing something a particular way that seems unusual to you, if it's not an adaptation for my disability, it's because that was how I was taught to do it, either in my professional training or on a professional job, you know? And so it sort of is like mind-boggling to me that like people have the audacity to come into my comment section and tell me I'm doing it wrong. Still, never mind. So yes, find what works for you. And most importantly, don't listen to other people. If other people are criticizing you for doing something which is an adaptation you have made to accommodate your disability, that's ableism. Them, in my honest opinion. What's next? Got very passionate about that, blimey. Set realistic goals. In my notes that I made before this, I've just written next to that one, lol, no. I still struggle with this. And I talk about, it's really funny in that previous video, I'm like, you have to be brutally honest with yourself about what you are able to achieve. Yeah, I'm still overcommitting myself. I'm still taking on more than I can manage. In a way, to me, that's not necessarily a bad thing, that I have this tendency to overcommit myself, because it shows passion to me. I am passionate about doing this. I am passionate about costuming, and that's not a bad thing. I just have to remember that The passion is useless if I end up ill and burnt out at the end of it. The passion won't get me through a project alone. So I am still struggling with setting realistic goals. And I think that's the next point I talk about as well is good, better and best. Yes. And I do find I still am using that system. I've actually even seen other people adopt it as well on YouTube. And I'm not saying they got it from me. They probably came up with it their own accord. But I think it is telling that it's not just me. It's not just disabled people. You know, our ambitions and our reality often don't line up, and that can be because of disability, but it can be because of time, the realities of life, family commitments. And so I do really find that implementing that good, better and best system does help me rein in my expectations and cope with the disappointment. That's what I talk about in that video, is that you start with the good, and the good is plan A. And if things go wrong, you can downgrade things, like in my shitty chemise video, for example. I've been like, well, I was hoping for good, we're settling for good enough. But plan A is good and plan B is better. So it becomes an upgrade instead of a downgrade in expectation. And keeping that mentality has really helped me to rein in some of my unrealistic goals. And also cope with the disappointment of not meeting them, because it happens, it always does, particularly if you have deadlines to work with or if you have a fluctuating condition like I do. We have to adapt and we have to accept that it's not going to always go our way, and that's okay.
Something else that I find really helpful as someone with a variable activity level is to work on more than one project at once.
I'd forgotten about that one. Yeah, working on more than one project at once. When I talked about that, I got a lot of comments from people with ADHD who were like, yes, absolutely, it's the only way I could work is if I've got more than one thing on the go. And I hadn't really considered it like that. So that definitely was one of the things that I learned from you, was about how it's not just about a match up with your physical energy, having more than one project, you know, so you can do, if you're having a bad day, you can do an easy bit on something else rather than tackle that massive mammoth challenge in that big long-term project you've been working on. But also how it can help you stay focused and making progress on your goals if you can switch between things, you know, even if it just stops you getting overwhelmed, makes you less anxious, that sort of thing. Oh, and similarly, a lot of people commented as well about how breaking projects down into smaller chunks really helps with a similar sort of thing, particularly if you get overwhelmed. Just tackling little bits at a time can help from a sort of mental health or sort of cognitive point of view, as well as a physical energy point of view. So thanks, team, for helping me out with that one.
So sometimes the only thing to do is to ask for help.
Ask for help. Yes, absolutely. Ask for help, and I wish people did this more. It's not cheating to ask somebody to help you. Of course it isn't, and that goes for online as well. If you're struggling with something, even if it's just making a decision, it's not a cop-out or whatever to do an Instagram poll. Most clothing is a team effort, even if it's at sort of industrial fast fashion level or custom-made costumes for theatre and film or designer couture level. It's not one person making a costume from start to finish. You're in a workroom, you're in a team, you're either in a production line where you just do your one job and that's all you have to worry about, or you have a team of people working on a garment so that you can bounce ideas off each other. You know, I've been in workrooms where I've worked with a first cutter who's turned around to me as like the first hand and been like, what do you think about that line on the stand? And I'm like, I think it's a bit short, that sort of thing. You know, so it's a collaborative process. So asking for help is not a cop-out. You do not have to do it all yourself. It's absolutely fine. And I think some of us, myself included, need to remember that as well. The next thing I talk about is how I tackle cutting, because I have a new setup now, so I'll talk about that with you, which has helped, but a lot of the things in this original video are still the same, so I'll come back to that one later. The next point I have is learn to use a thimble. And I got really passionate about this, and then I felt really bad because somebody commented on it like, I can't use a thimble, I can't feel the end of my fingers, they're too heavy for me to wear. And then I felt like, oh God, no, I got on my high horse about something and I was, you know, discriminating against people basically. Not everyone can use a thimble. You might not have all your fingers. So yeah, that's my bad. Sorry, team. What I will say is I find using a thimble really helpful, and I think it comes back to the find what works for you thing. Didn't listen to my own advice there, did I? But also, I talk about how I use a thimble for pinning. I was previously using very fine silk pins, and I've since swapped to slightly thicker glass head pins. And that's because I find I'm working with slightly heavier weight fabrics at the minute. But also, I don't need to wear a thimble to use the glass-headed pins. I find the glass heads are perfectly fine. I've also lost the silk pins. I don't know where they are, so I either need to buy some more and sort of readjust and see what I do prefer. I've also since learned there are specially designed ergonomic pins. I personally haven't used them, but I know Samantha from Purple Sewing Cloud is a big fan, and she has written a blog post for Tilly and the Buttons this month about various other ergonomic, disability-friendly sewing tools that she likes. So I'll leave a link to that as well for you to have a look at, to give you some more inspiration, again, about finding what works for you. What's really funny to me watching this video back, I deliberately wore the same jumper. That was a choice. But at the time, even in my own journey with disability, at this point in time when I made this video, I could never talk on the fly to a camera like this. My brain fog was so bad, my word finding issues were so bad, and I was so self-conscious of it that it was preferable for me to write out a script and read it, despite the fact at this moment in time I could barely read. And so watching this back is so funny because it's so painful watching me read the script really gently in my gentle RP voice like this, knowing how much I was struggling and thinking that was preferable to doing this. Wow. Batch your tasks. As you know, I still do this all the time. I see lots of other sewers do it as well. If it's not a system you have adopted, I suggest you try it. It really has revolutionized the way I'm able to make things and the speed at which I'm able to make things as well. It can be incredibly satisfying. It's not as satisfying as like ticking off each instruction in a sewing pattern as you go, but there is a moment where you feel like you've been sewing for ages and ages and ages, and then all of a sudden you have a garment and you're like, oh wow, it's nearly done. So if you haven't tried batching your tasks together, I'd highly recommend it. It's great for sewing, but also doing things like cutting out if you have a good energy day, cut loads of things at once so you're ready to go for when you're not feeling so well, or, you know, things like pre-washing your fabric if you know you struggle to do laundry and you've got several projects you want to do coming up. Pre-wash, iron all the fabric at once so that they're all sat there ready to go on a good day, and then you can start whenever you're ready. It's not just for disabled people, that one. I think it makes everybody's life easier, just saves time as well. Next on the list is organize supplies, and I've just put a laughing face emoji next to that one because, well, the chaos in this room at the moment. The point I made in that original video stands. It's just the reality is tidying takes a lot of energy, and I don't always have the energy or the sort of mental strength to face the mess in this room. I think it's probably going to have to be a little bit at a time sort of jobby for me in here. And again, ask for help. I cannot push a hoover around, so I'm going to have to get somebody else to do that. There's some cobwebs I can't reach. I'm going to have to get somebody else to do that sort of thing. Ask for help. And then the last point I made in that original video was about ironing and how to iron sitting down and what a game changer that has been. But I since have a brand new ironing setup that I'm really excited to show you about, because you might know my little mini steam iron has been broken for a really long time. And I've received a very generous donation from a supporter on Ko-fi, and I've been able to get it fixed. And I'm so thrilled. And I'm so excited to show you. So this is the level of mess that we're dealing with. The calendar's still on June and it's the end of July. I've got things all over the floor as well. Look at this. And this over here is my cutting table next to the fridge. And I can't get to it because it's full of stuff. So I think what I'm going to do here is practice what I preach a little bit. I'm going to set a timer, maybe for about 15 minutes, see how much I can tidy up in 15 minutes, have a rest, and then come back and film the rest of this video, basically. So the time has gone off, and this is where I've got to. So I'm not done, but I'm going to pause, make myself a cup of tea, and then come back to this in a little bit. So in that previous video, I didn't want to include anything that you would have to buy, because I didn't think that's fair to be like, oh, how to sew with a disability, buy all this adaptive equipment. You know, there are other things you can do to make it work. However, having been doing this now for 3 years, there are some things that I have bought that have been absolutely game-changing, so I do want to share them with you in the hope that it will also be game-changing for you. So in terms of my ironing setup, previously I talked about how I sit down to iron, and I still sit down to iron, but rather than sitting at a conventional ironing board that you can get in any sort of homeware store, I have adapted my ironing setup to be able to fit on my sewing table. So the way I do this, I have here an extension cord. that runs around the edge of the room from the plug socket, and it always sits on my table. And so I have my light plugged in, I have my sewing machine plugged in usually. I can also have my overlocker plugged in if I need to, and I can have my iron plugged in. And that saves energy in that I just don't have to get up, root around to plug things in, unplug things. Now, this is an old sewing table, so it originally would have had a sewing machine in, and my dad changed it and he put old planks of wood on the top, but it means it's got these divots in, so I always have a big cutting mat, which is almost exactly the right size, complete coincidence, on top of here to stop the pins falling in the cracks, to stop fabric snagging on the wood, that sort of thing. You can see it's kind of gotten a bit warped with use, but I'm told you can heat them up and flatten them out, and that's the sort of thing. One day I'll get round to it if I ever have the energy. So what I did, rather than buy a tabletop ironing board, I do have also one of these, which fits on the table here as well. But actually I find I reach for more often this wool pressing mat, and I store it under the table, down here. And that just means, it sits on the floor, so it gets a bit fluffy, but I don't really mind. And this has been revolutionary for me because I can batch all my sewing tasks, put my sewing machine away, get my ironing board out. Sometimes actually I can push the sewing machine right the way back there, and this fits in front of the sewing machine, so I don't even have to lift anything on and off the table apart from this. And then I can press everything on top of my wool pressing mat. The only thing is, it's not ideal for everything. For example, you can imagine long skirt seams or long lengths of fabric it's not ideal for. And also you can't, on an ironing board, quite often you hang things over the ends, you can get in there. So instead what I do is I use my tailor's ham. If you don't have a tailor's ham anyway, I recommend getting one because 90% of good sewing is good pressing, probably. And they just make things so much easier and more manageable. And I find safer because if you've got a hot iron on and you're fiddling with a bit of fabric and something gets caught and it tips over, I just find this safer to be able to sort of like manhandle it like this and get the seam exactly where I want it on the ham before I even switch on or pick up my iron. However, again, this isn't ideal for everything. So I have a sleeve board. Now, as you can see, the cover's come off. I desperately need to recover it. I've been using it like this, just with the metal for a little while. And it does work, but it's not ideal. This I picked up, I think I paid £1 for it at a car boot sale, something like that. It wasn't very expensive at all. And this is brilliant for things that you do need to get over and sort of have, like sleeves, for example. You need to get the ironing board inside something. That's what I use this for. You may have noticed, of course, you know about my little iron, my beloved tiny little iron, which is now back in working order and leaking, apparently. Put too much water in. This has been revolutionary for me because it means I can have it set up on the table here, and it's so small that I can have it set up in the corner here at all times, basically, with the sewing machine, with the pressing mat. The only thing about it being small is it's quite easy to knock over, so I do have to be really careful when it's on. So because of that, I bought one of these little heat-proof mats that I can stand it on. I don't tend to stand it flat like that, I tend to stand it upright like that, and that just makes it it's grippier, so I'm less likely to knock it over. But the only other downside I've found to having a small iron, this iron gets really hot, it gets up to full temperature, it steams now that I've got it unclogged and working again. So it works absolutely like an ordinary iron, but because it's so small and light, they call it pressing for a reason. You need downward pressure. And I find if I'm working with a particularly bouncy fabric like a wool or something that's quite heavyweight, this isn't heavy enough and I don't have the strength to push down hard enough to get a nice crisp finish on seams. But I have found a way to resolve that. Bought myself a tailor's clapper. So you can see this, I bought this at a local sewing shop, it was £17.50. I don't know how much they go for online, you can probably find them cheaper. But this is a beautiful bit of wood. It's quite heavy, but because it's got a nice sort of big grippy ergonomic handle, I don't struggle with it as much as I thought I would. But I use this all the time in terms of pressing as well. I can sort of just push down gently on this and it's heavy enough that I get a nice crisp seam without having to really go at something with the iron, which is just exhausting. The other downside of this tiny little iron is it has a tiny little water reservoir, so it runs out of steam really quickly. Now, the best kind of water to use in your iron is not actually ironing water or deionized water, it's just filtered tap water. So I have here the bookshelves here with the plastic storage boxes for my fabric, and round the corner here on the edge of the shelf I keep a plastic jug full of filtered water, and I can just top up my little iron as and when I need it, and I don't have to get up from my seat. I can reach it from my same usual sewing position. So, do you need to buy all these extra gubbins to sew in an accessible, manageable way? Absolutely not. But I have found that the benefit of just being able to sit down, not having to get up and walk anywhere. Not only does it save so much energy for me, but also it makes me much more inclined to actually do good pressing, because I found previously I was like, do I really need to press this? It means I'm going up the stairs. Shall I not bother? And then I would skip those steps that really help to elevate a garment. So it's definitely upped my sewing game, as well as helped me to continue making things, which I love. And I store all these bits. Oh look, I've even got my steamer under here. These are my buttons and my other fasteners. I store all of these under here so that I can get them, again, without having to stand up. So that slots in there quite nicely. That fits in there on top of there quite nicely. The only one I don't store is this one, which I store on the shelves. Oh, I also forgot to mention about the ironing setup. I keep a spray bottle with water for if I need to really set something in without maybe the use of the clapper. I just wet it and I leave the iron on it and I sort of let it dry into position. I found that has been really useful as well. But that usually lives round the corner with a bottle of water. So the other thing that I have found to be really useful in terms of gadgets is this. And this is a Clover dome, and it's a needle case that stores pre-threaded needles. And so I originally bought one of these when I was working in theatre because it was brilliant to have in my dresser's belt, because, you know, a button comes off unexpectedly halfway through an act. Oh, what am I going to do? Well, if you've got a whole load of pre-threaded needles in different colours, you can just whip one out and tack it in place there and then. And so the way this works, let me pull one out. So you thread the needle with a length of thread. It takes a variety of sizes of needles, so I tend to like these quite short ones for hand sewing. And then you put it into your little slot, number 4, and you rotate it around to line up with this little slot, and then it will catch it in that blue bit, and you can wind it in like that, and it will wind, that one's gone a bit awry, but it will wind the thread in a little spiral around the centre of this thing, so that, which one was it, number 4. So say I need this needle in a hurry, all I have to do is pull on it and it pulls out nice and neat and tidy, ready to go. This has been so brilliant in making my hand sewing more efficient, because you can thread all the needles at once, again batching your tasks together, load them up. They're stored nice and safely and securely in their little plastic dome, and then anytime I run out of thread, I just need to go, oh, next one, next one, next one, and there it is, ready to go. Oh, there we are, quilt dome, that's what it's called, by Clover. Again, links to all these things will be in the description. That was one of the tips I read from one of you in the comments, so if that was you, thank you so much. This was brilliant, particularly when I was making Little Dorrit. I was doing a lot of hand sewing there, and I was running out of thread, and so I found that so useful to be like, oh, okay, how much further have I got to go on this hem? Do I think it's 5 needles worth of thread, 10 needles worth of thread? This was brilliant, so I highly recommend one of these. Which kind of leads me on to my next point, which is, honestly, use as many gadgets as you need. There seems to be this sort of stigma in, particularly I think in historical sewing circles, but maybe in contemporary sewing as well. Maybe it comes from a sustainability point of view. I'm not sure, but to me it's misguided. People are like, oh, why are you buying all this needless junk that you're not going to use and is just going to sit around? They're just trying to sell you stuff. It's just capitalism. Well, maybe for you it's just capitalism, but I have found this incredibly useful as someone with a disability. So don't let people's narrow-minded, ill-informed opinions make you feel bad if you have to use adaptive tools or extra things, gadgets, whatever it is, to help you in your sewing practice. And if you have been reluctant to try things, even though they might make things easier for you from, I don't know, a point of maybe it's not historically accurate, or you're worried what people might think, or also, let's be real, these things can be expensive and they don't always work great. So it is a risk to try them, in which case I highly recommend you watch Nanny's series called Keep or Yeet, where she tries a whole load of sewing gadgets from different price points, from big brands, Clover, Prim, Hemline, that sort of thing, to see if they're any good or not. And she gives a really sort of honest review of a lot of them. I found that series incredibly useful. She talked about not this kind of little iron, but you know, the sort of on a stick that quilters often use. I was considering getting one of those, and she was like, I don't think it's right for me because it doesn't get hot enough and it doesn't work the way I want it to, and so I didn't buy one. You know, that can be really useful information. Don't let the bastards get you down. If you need to use aids to help you in your sewing, go for it. Use as many as you need. So the last thing I want to talk about that has been a game changer for me, partly because it's really helped with the lighting in this video on the, this month the weather in England has been absolutely mental. Like, I'm wearing a jumper. Trying to get a consistent quality of light, not just to film, but also to sew, has been really difficult. That's why I'm really glad I bought this. My ring light and magnifier. Yeah, what can I say? It's one of those things, I didn't think I was straining my eyes sewing. Turns out I absolutely was, and this has made so much difference. Oh, look, it's really dusty. I don't use the magnifier as much as I use the light, but I've found that having this adjustable thing so that I can really get it to be exactly where I want the light, yeah, that's been absolutely brilliant. It wasn't cheap, this one. I think I bought mine from Hobbycraft. I think it was about £60. But I use it every time I sew, so it's definitely paid for itself. And when I went to the opticians recently, he was like, do you do a lot of driving? Do you stare at a computer a lot? And I was like, oh no, I'm a seamstress. And she went, oh yeah, that makes sense. You're making yourself short-sighted. So I really need to be more careful with my eyes, protect my eyes. And I like to think this is helping, maybe, I don't know. Also, I find that little tray and the clip thing incredibly useful as well. So like my pattern pieces for whatever I'm working on get clipped in here. They're within reach of the table, but they're out of the way, not littering up the place, not on the floor getting trodden on. And I keep a lot of like you can see my beeswax and my sewing machine oil. I keep a lot of my sort of like necessary in-reach tools in that little compartment there as well. We were going to talk about cutting, weren't we? But I haven't tidied up the cutting table, so I'm a little bit reluctant to show it to you. So what I might have to do is show you some sort of B-roll of me using it from a previous video and explain over it. I previously cut everything out on my dining room table, but this inconvenienced my entire family and was also just not right for me. It wasn't the right height. I was always nervous about scratching it, so I had to put this big board of plywood on top of it, which was heavy and difficult to maneuver on my own. So in 2020, when it became clear that we weren't going anywhere quickly, and also that my health was, you know, we were in it for the long run this time, as opposed to what I hoped would be like a sort of 6-week sabbatical from my professional working life. My dad very kindly offered to convert the garage in my parents' house so that I could have a little designated workroom so that I could work from home. And this is one of the things that has also really helped. And I recognise it's a privilege that not everybody has, to have a designated space for sewing. I don't have to spend energy setting up my machine, sorting out my supplies, going to get things and collect things before I can even start. So that has been massively helpful as well, and I appreciate I'm very lucky, and it has been life-changing for me because it has enabled me to do this and to start to build a possible sort of accessible route to employment again for me. So as part of that, one of the things he also did was he built me a custom cutting table. And this was made from an old sort of dining table with the collapsible sides that we got secondhand in a charity shop. And he put it on wheels so that I can drag it in and out of a little alcove in the back there. And he made it exactly the perfect height so that it's perfect cutting out height for me. Now, like all things, it is better. It has its downsides. It barely fits in this room, so I have to really tightly sort of shimmy around it to be able to cut things out. It's not the biggest, so a lot of very big, particularly for historical costumes, a lot of the very biggest pattern pieces won't fit on it. So it does mean that I do still have frustrations with cutting, and I do still sometimes cut things out on the dining room table or on the floor if I'm up to that. But what I tend to do still is what I talked about in that previous video. I do the big pattern pieces on my cutting table standing up. I have a rest, and then I come back and cut everything up and trim everything up as well, because I often just cut round them roughly to get it over and done with quickly. And then I come back and I put them on my table here and I even them up sitting down. Still don't use a rotary cutter. Don't think I'm ever going to be a rotary cutter sort of person. Still a big fan of my spring-loaded scissors. I haven't changed that. And I really notice as well if I misplace them or for whatever reason I'm having to use somebody else's fabric scissors. I really notice the difference between the spring-loaded action that I'm used to and sort of like having to pivot with my thumb. Even just doing that, makes me cringe. I still am envious of, you see people in other parts of the world and they have like an entire sewing basement and they have a 60-inch wide cutting table. But the reality is, I live in Britain, I live with my parents. It's not my space really, I have to share it. Like, you can see the rest of this room if you like. We have the fridge there, there's a whole load of shoes in the corner that people have to access. You know, like there's the meters, we now have the boxes for the solar panels, we have all the shopping bags with the coats, and also, of course, this door leads out into the rest of the garage, and so people have to be able to walk through here all the time as well. So it's a multi-purpose space. I can't just leave everything all over the place like I sometimes do. I have to consider the rest of my family and the fact that they need to use this space as well. But still, just having this tiny weeny little section of the garage to do my little thing, leave my mess everywhere. I mean, you can see that down there as well. That has really made a difference too. So I think that's it. This is probably going to be quite a long video. I hope you don't mind that it was a bit more informal than the last one, because that last one was part of COVID. I made it very much like a formal lecture. But I actually found that when watching it back, I found that quite impersonal. And so I hope you've seen a little bit more of the reality of sewing with a disability. It doesn't always go to plan. I don't follow my own rules a lot of the time. I'm chaotic and messy and unrealistic and all those sorts of things. But I hope you realise, if you are new to this little community here, that you're not alone with your struggles. There are things you can do to make life easier for yourself, and you should do them and not be ashamed of that. And I hope if you have been here for a little while, or maybe some of the tips in the previous video helped you get started again, I hope you're really proud of yourself for adapting, for persevering, for doing all those things that disabled people are brilliant at and should be celebrated. So happy Disability Pride. It's a real shame that more people haven't been talking about it or celebrating this month. But just know that if you are disabled and you are a part of this community, I see you, I value you, and I'm proud of you. So thanks very much for watching. See you next time.